In just under half an hour's time, we'll get the first indication of how voting has been going. The election was called suddenly by President Macron after his party suffered a heavy defeat in the European Parliament elections. Well, joining me now is Jamie Smith-Maillet, freelance journalist and expert in French politics. Good to see you, Jamie. How do you think this is all going to pan out?
Yeah, well, as we were saying a few weeks ago, indeed, as you mentioned there, after the European parliamentary elections, the immediate reaction was one of a gamble that many were saying that Macron had decided to dissolve the parliament. And that's perhaps still where things are today. The polls have suggested, in fact, more or less mirroring, first of all, what we saw in the European parliamentary elections, that the far-right party, the National Rally, would come out top. And that is still where we're sitting today as the French go to the polls in the first round of the election. So indeed a gamble for Mr. Macron, perhaps also one that was definitely risky for him and for his party. And we should really know where things stand with the exit poll expected at 8 p.m. in France, 7 p.m. in the UK.
Yes, not long to wait now. Just explain how the voting works. 2 rounds.
Indeed, it is a majority system, which we're familiar to in a way in the UK, but it is over 2 rounds, which is the slight difference. So what that means is tonight, in seats or constituencies where a candidate gains over 50% of the vote, and if there is over 25% of turnout in that seat, they'll immediately win that seat. In the other cases, there's a runoff between the top 2 candidates and the third or possibly fourth candidate if they have 12.5% of the vote, and that's of the overall registered electorate in that seat. So a bit of maths there to figure out how it's going to work out for next week.
Yes, indeed. And the National Rally, a phenomenal success. What is it about them that is appealing to so many people?
Yeah, well, I think we can look perhaps first of all at the European parliamentary elections, where traditionally there have been low turnout. And what we're seeing today, just to quickly talk about turnout, is also that the turnout possibly in these elections is actually a record high. Why have they been doing well? Well, ultimately, they've perhaps played into a number of issues, the crises across France as well at the moment, seen elsewhere, the cost of living crisis in some ways. Some might say as well the questions around immigration, and these are topics that come up again and again. Second point to make is that their young lead candidate, Jordan Bardella, who's only 28 years old, he's the co-leader of the party, he's done very well on social media. And he's actually played out to a lot of younger voters who he now has over 1.7 million followers on his TikTok account. And that perhaps in some ways can say that has been a slight lead or successor to this party doing well in the polls up until now. But I mean, yet to be seen how they really will perform. The parliamentary elections for European parliamentary elections, this is a proportional representation system versus the majority system, as we're saying here. So we will see tonight, and also have to wait until next Sunday for the final outcome.
Yeah, and you talked about President Macron taking this huge gamble. Many see this as something of a referendum on him.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were talking about the European parliamentary elections being a sort of midterm test for President Macron, almost like in a sort of American presidential system. This year, in any case, where it fell. Now he's given himself a midterm test by launching the dissolution of the National Assembly and the vote happening today. So is it a test for him in many ways? His popularity rating has been very low. I mean, it was at 35% approval, and it actually fell away since this announcement just a few weeks ago. So, however, he has clearly said that he will still stand in office through to 2027 at the end of his presidential term, which is the end of his second term. So tricky times ahead for President Macron, that's for sure.
Well, very tricky, because we could see a situation where 2 men who are fundamentally opposed on their politics end up having to work together.
Absolutely. And this is called, in France, this is the so-called cohabitation, is where the president is of one party and the prime minister or cabinet is of another party. But we've never seen a centrist or a mainstream party in any case with a cohabitation of the far right, because there's simply not been a far right cabinet or government. And this, it is what many people are saying, commentators, analysts, and the French population. It's quite unbelievable, uncanny to think that possibly could happen in just over a week's time. time. So eyes are on France for this possibly happening for so many reasons. But at the same time, eyes will be continuing to look at France because, of course, the Olympics are there in just a few weeks' time as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very tense, I think, isn't it, at the moment in France? Do you think there's a fear that we could see protests on the streets, maybe from anti-hard right protesters?
Yes, I mean, that already was the case after the European parliamentary elections a few weeks back. That there is, there will be, unrest on the streets. Possibly this evening, most likely in any case, given whatever result happens in a week's time. Emmanuel Macron and his party did talk about civil war a few weeks ago, which many have been saying perhaps was an exaggeration in any case, and more of a strategy for him to pull in voters to what he sees as the centrist safe vote with his party grouping ensemble. But yes, there is a likelihood of unrest on the streets in not just in Paris but around France and in a number of urban centres around the country.
OK, good to get your thoughts. We'll perhaps get you back on once we have a more definitive result. Jamie Smith-Maillet, thank you.
Thank you.